Hey guys, so today's lecture is going to be on Greek mathematics and science. It's a revolutionary idea that the ancient Greeks came up with that is the foundation for Western civilization ideas in science and mathematics. I want to take you back before I start this to the idea of the ancient world. The ancient people were not stupid, they were primitive. Before the ancient Greeks, the ancient people had observed the world around them and tried to figure it out, just like people do today. But instead of coming up with science and mathematics, what they often came up with were polytheistic gods and goddesses. That was the supernatural to them, to explain the things that were unexplainable. The Greeks, or at least some Greeks, during the classical period, the 3rd, 4th, and 5th centuries, came up with an idea that, wait a minute, it's not about the gods and goddesses. It's about using logical reasoning to figure out, exactly what the world or the physical world is and how can we understand it. And we'll start with the idea of astronomy first. The Greeks figured out that the Earth was round based on a lunar eclipse. We'll talk about that in a different slide. They also developed what's known as the geocentric model of the universe. This is the Earth-centered model of the universe. Geo meaning Earth. And then we'll talk briefly about Greek ideas behind medicine and why they were so revolutionary. We'll talk about a guy named Hippocrates. And finally, we will end our discussion today with the development of a mathematical science known as geometry, the mathematics of space and volume. And that'll be covered on our last slide. And the entire idea behind Greek notions of how to see the world was wrapped up in what's known as humanism. Humanism is the idea that man can figure out the world by observing it, and then by logical reasoning, use the mind to figure it out. Remember, Greeks had been taught that they could use their mind to figure out any situation. It's the whole notion of the Greek hero that we see from the Iliad and the Odyssey. Well, some Greeks by the time of Athens and Sparta, the time of classical Greece, started putting this idea of humanism together to say that, well, we can figure out everything in the world, not just how to outsmart our enemies, but we can figure out the physical world around us by using observation and logical reasoning. It's got to be logical. That's where they come up with the science. The first idea that the Greeks come up with is called the geocentric model of the universe. Geo meaning earth-centered. Obviously, I'm in my classroom. That's the bell. So, earth-centered model of the universe. It's a model based on the idea that if you observe the sky, simply look, the sun rises in the east and sets in the west. And sure enough, it rises in the east the next morning. It appears to go around the earth. Appears to go around the earth. Now, we have this idea here in the modern age that the earth spins. But remember, they couldn't see that. There was no way for the Greeks to understand that concept. So they simply went off of what they could see. They determined that the earth was round based on a shadow on the moon for a lunar eclipse. They determined how big it was based on observation and measurements. They were pretty close, a couple of 100 miles off. And then they said, well, if we look every day, if we actually observe the heavens, then everything appears to go around the earth, whether it be the sun, planets. They figured out what planets were, at least some of them. It's the ones that they could see. They figured out that the stars themselves seem to be rotating around the earth. Therefore, everything appears to revolve around the earth. They said, okay, what does that mean? Well, that means that the earth must be at the center of the universe. It's earth-centered. This would be the standard for astronomy, the standard for this type of science, until the 17th century CE. This is a revolutionary idea because before this, before the ancient Greeks, before the time of classical Greece, people had thought that the sun went across the sky because it was a chariot of the gods or it was a god itself. Regardless of the ancient civilization, they had attributed supernatural, godlike powers to what they saw in the heavens. And some of the Greeks said, no, that's not right. Even if we believe in the gods and goddesses, we can figure out what is up in the sky. And that's where we come up with this geocentric model. Next, turning to medicine, a guy named Hippocrates came along and he said, oh, wait a minute. You're sick not because you've made a god angry or that you need to make a sacrifice to something. Instead, Hippocrates said, okay, let me look at you. Let me observe. And as he observed people, tried to figure out what was wrong with them, what he observed, or at least he believed, was that there were 4 fluids in the body. 4 fluids that he could observe. The first was blood. That seems pretty obvious. The second, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. Black bile and yellow bile are more like stomach acids that come out of the innards, if you will. But we're going to concentrate our discussion on blood and phlegm. So let's say that you went to go see Hippocrates, the so-called father of medicine. He would say, okay, let's look at you. Let's try to figure out what's wrong. Well, if you came in with a fever, you were all hot, you're sweating, and he notices that your skin is red. And he would say, oh, okay, I know what's wrong with you. You see, you got too much blood. That blood is trying to get out of you. That's why it's at the top of your skin. So he would say, okay, what we need to do is we need to get that blood out. So they would literally take your arm and they would cut a hole in it and they would drain some of the blood out. Seems kind of primitive to us, but that's a revolutionary idea. That's an idea that goes against everything from the ancient world. The ancients had said, no, the reason that you're sick is because you need to go home and make a sacrifice to the gods. And Hippocrates said, no. You have too much blood. The key is, though, you don't want to throw that blood away because the next person coming in, they may have too little blood. They may come in and their skin may be cold and clammy. Well, no problem. You just simply open them up and you pour some blood in. And before you're too horrified by that idea, the Greeks couldn't see that there are different types of blood. After all blood is red. That's what they could see. We didn't understand that there were different types of blood until the 19th century, 150 years ago. Because you can't tell just by looking at it that blood is different. All humans, as far as we know, have red blood. That's what they could see. Then there was phlegm. Think of phlegm as like stuff that comes out of your nose. So let's say that you go in, you either have a cough or a runny nose, and you're hawking stuff up, and or your stuff's coming out of your nose, and you're having to blow it all the time. He would say, "Okay, you have too much phlegm. You see, we need to get some of that phlegm out of you." And there were herbs and what have you that they could give you in order to get some of that out. But there's a much easier way. What they would do is they would take a hot piece of metal that had been sitting in the fire, and they would stick it to your skin, and you would bubble up. And then they would pop the bubble because that's getting rid of phlegm. You know, it sounds primitive to us, but the idea of observation and diagnosis, that's still the model for medicine today. That's why Hippocrates is known as the father of medicine. He observed what he could see and then diagnosed and tried to cure. That's a revolutionary idea. Remember, the ancients before the Greeks had tried to say, no, you're sick because you've made a god angry or a goddess angry. You need to take care of that by praying or by sacrificing something. And finally, we end up with geometry. Ancient Greek geometry is based on the measurements of the earth. Geometry is a mathematical principle. It's based on observation and logical reasoning. What they would do is they would actually measure things and try to figure out the world around them. You'll study geometry in great detail when you get up into high school. You'll learn about people like Pythagoras. Pythagoras was a classical Greek mathematician who lived in ancient Athens during the classical age, and he came up with a theorem or a theory that tried to explain how a triangle actually works. You see, the Greeks who studied geometry, they were into building and engineering. They wanted to be able to repeat their measurements. They created models of buildings. And then built them. Again, you'll study geometry in great detail when you get up into high school. But the idea that it is a measurement of the earth based on observation and logical reasoning, based on humanistic principles. So you can thank the Greeks for having to study geometry. All right, guys. So that's our lecture for today. Just to review as to what we covered. Hold on one second. So just to review, we covered, let's see if I can get this on here. Hold on. Here we go. So we covered humanism, we covered astronomy, and the geocentric model of the universe. We covered medicine and Hippocrates and the four what he called humors or fluids of the body. And then finally we covered mathematics. And we covered geometry. All based on humanistic ideas. Observation and logical reasoning. That's the key to understanding how the Greeks saw the world around them. And that's the revolution. All right, hope you took good notes.